Welcome to the Digital.Health Studio Series webinar, where we illuminate key trends, drivers, and breakthroughs at the intersection of health and tech. I'm Risa Vatanka, co-founder and CEO of Digital.Health, a platform and global community on a mission to accelerate adoption of digital health and AI-powered solutions to usher in a new era of health. Our studio series is where we create space for innovators to share how they've developed these advanced technologies, and for leaders to share their value in practice, and for clinicians and people with lived experience to share how they've adopted these solutions to address unmet needs. Because we recognize that it's not just the technology, but it's the people and processes. That's how you get broad adoption and scaling. Our aim is really to provide models that others can emulate, to accelerate broad adoption, to inspire others to integrate these technologies to address health disparities and improve access to quality healthcare. Today, we will be focusing on how to establish a strong foundation from the start when building a viable digital health company that endures and scales, so that these technologies can be integrated long-term in providing quality, accessible care for people in the communities we serve. Our format is that we will begin with what's new and next in health and tech. And then our special guest will be setting the stage for us with the foundational elements of building a strong company built to endure and scale. And then we will deep dive into our panel discussion. Today, we will be looking at designing for scale, how digital health companies build evidence, how they protect innovation, and how they create value to transform healthcare. At this time, I'd like to invite my co-host to join me on stage, the one and only brilliant, inspirational Dr. Daniel Kraft, physician, scientist, futurist. He is the founder and chair of Digital.Health and NextMed Health. Daniel, welcome.
Thanks, Teresa. I'm excited for this studio series. We have some amazing collaborators, and the topic of how to not just build but scale and start a digital health company to last is a really important one.
Yeah, completely. Really excited about the program today. Daniel and I want to thank our Digital.Health community for being on this journey with us. We want to thank our ecosystem partners, our Growth Catalyst members, all of you who've joined us for each of our studio series sessions, and welcome to those of you who are new to the series. Okay, Daniel, you are always traveling the globe. I don't think I know anybody who travels as much as you do, inspiring the masses through your incredible keynote presentations. And as you're on your travels, you have this incredible opportunity to experience cutting edge technologies firsthand. So we're always inspired by your vision of healthcare today and in the future. So without further ado, I welcome you to kick us off with what's new and next in health and tech.
Great. I will just give you a quick dash around some of the things that are happening across the health and AI and digital health spectrum. Of course, the theme is now, near, and next and needed. So, our now model of healthcare is still a bit intermittent, reactive, sick care, still often based in the four walls of a clinic or hospital, often based on the cognition of one clinician or team. The near, which is really emerging through many of the members of this community, is to bring continuous data and insights that's hybrid, physical, and virtual, leveraging crowdsourced knowledge, of course, enhanced with AI, to bring us really to what's next, where we're not just doing sick care, but health creation that's leveraging the digital AI tools to be predictive, preemptive, leveraging ambient sensing, multimodal data, and collective intelligence, not artificial intelligence, to really orchestrate better health access and equity. And of course, AI and digital is at the center of this, touching every element of the healthcare continuum. I saw this post from Eric Topol yesterday. There's a lot of positives to AI, but thinking about the future of the clinician and workforce, we've heard about de-skilling, but I like this term I just saw from Eric, never skilling, clinicians training in this new era of AI who may have never learned how to develop a differential diagnosis by themselves is an interesting thing to consider as we move into this new exponential AI and digitally enhanced age. But on the plus side, as we're looking at the digital health space, just yesterday, big news that Aura, the smart ring company, I'm sure many of you are wearing one like me, is going public at a 10 billion plus valuation, just to show the energy in the space. And some of their big investors prior to the IPO are coming from health tech. So they're moving from kind of consumer wearable to the health space as well. And I've always proposed that the future of clinical exams will leverage our wearable data from our auras and our whoops and our ultra humans and Fitbits and beyond. And if you go on Digital.Health, you can find a whole selection of smart rings and beyond that are sort of enabling the shift from consumer to medicalization and continuous multimodal data. So lots to explore on Digital.Health. And of course, the Googles of the world aren't standing still. They just announced their Fitbit Air, which will, I think, more directly compete with Whoop. It won't have any kind of monthly fee, but just shows you that these sort of tools are becoming more and more common. I think the technology base is sort of almost the wearable itself is commoditized. It's the AI and machine learning and the agentic element that becomes more relevant. So things are accelerating, particularly bringing digital, wearable, and otherables together into the space. Some news out and studies continue to show that AI can do, in some cases, a better job than clinicians in real world situations, including making emergency room triage and diagnostic decisions. And of course, as we mentioned in the past, each of us are probably now going to not Dr. Google, but Dr. GPT or Dr. Claude to help us answer our healthcare questions. In many cases, before or replacing clinical visits. A study out from last month found that 14 million adults were skipping a provider visit after using AI. And so that's an interesting impact upon clinical resources and platforms. So nice editorial in New York Times yesterday because chatbots are empathetic. They can take their time. They can look at lots of data now. And just to show an example of how quickly that's moving, I used to have this cartoon as a joke. You can't list your iPhone as your primary care physician. But a couple months ago, a Bay Area company launched, I think, with $40 million of funding from Andreessen Horowitz called Lotus Health. It's only available, I believe, for California patients. It's basically an AI primary care chatbot, but it integrates all your medical records. Here's what I integrated from my Apple Health Kit data to my WeThings to my medical records. Really interesting, and I'm still getting over a cold. I thought I'd try it out last week because I had a bit of a wheeze and etc. And I was able to use the app with human clinicians in the loop to prescribe an albuterol inhaler that I picked up at my local CVS. So really interesting democratization of care. It's a free platform. Just the beginning, I think, of this agentic age. Clinicians aren't waiting often for their IT departments to make these tools and solutions available. Open Evidence and Doximity and others have platforms to help clinicians make better diagnostic and therapeutic decisions. That's ramping up quickly. 1 million uses a day were hit on Open Evidence last month. So that's changing the game of how clinicians across the board use AI and digital health tools. And increasingly, we started out with AI platforms doing better at most of us in passing medical exams, starting to do simulated consultations, starting to do pre-visits, but now this idea of an AI clinician is emerging, as exemplified by work from Google DeepMind, which showed off this sort of demo.
Hello there.
Hello, my right shoulder really hurts and I wanted to have it checked out.
Can you tell me when this pain started?
So it's also able to watch the patient.
Could you please try to lift your right arms as high as you can without causing too much pain?
Oh yeah, this hurts. This hurts quite a bit.
Thank you for showing me that. You might have an issue with your rotator cuff, possibly involving.
So just an example of where things are moving from sort of where we were with basic AI 5, 6 years ago, medical autocomplete, generic answers, to now starting to be a true clinical co-pilot and guiding care. And I think what's next is going to be more of this autonomous care orchestration, where each of us has our own ambient healthcare agent living with us in all sorts of modalities. Now, given how quickly the world's moving, it's also impacting science. Google again announced some really interesting platforms launched last week, the Gemini co-scientists. So those of you in the research space, from digital health to AI to basic science, can start leveraging these tools to really accelerate science, particularly exciting to accelerate novel insights and impact. And of course, all these are moving quickly. One thing we're trying to do in digital health is to integrate these and make them easy for you to find and track. So we've kind of rebooted and dramatically expanded our digital health resources. So if you go to digital.health digitalhealth.studio.com/resources, which hopefully Risa can put in the chat. We now have expanded that to 9 different shelves, from digital health journals, books, podcasts, newsletters, reports and white papers, frameworks, conferences, accelerators, investors. There's a lot emerging that's hard to track, but we're trying to make it easy from you. From now tracking over 27 medical journals, here are the ones that are flagship, as an example. So that makes it easy to track and leverage those. We've also built a platform to track all the digital health accelerators. So if you're looking for accelerating and building your digital health or AI-enabled startup, a whole new set of those. So check out Digital.Health resources. If you have new ones to add, please add those there. So that's a quick taste of a few things that are now near next. And now on to the rest of our program to really dive into what it takes to build a successful digital health company. Reset.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Absolutely incredible. Love that you shared a personal experience there with Lotus. Just amazing. The future is definitely already here. Okay, well, I am really excited to introduce our special guest, the Dr. David Albert, physician, scientist, inventor with over 100 patents, or maybe it's exactly 100 patents, and a proud grandfather and really an OG in digital health, a true trailblazer. So it's such an honor to have you here today to share with us and really set the stage, kind of the foundation of how, from the very start, to build a company that is set up for success to endure and scale. Dr. Dave.
Thank you, Risa, and thank you, Daniel. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm going to talk about what does it take to scale a digital health company. And we see Aura going public. It's phenomenal in the area. They started as, you would call it, a wellness tracker, tracking your steps, tracking your sleep. But as they say, they want to move more into health instead of wellness. Those two areas are really converging. And I come from a perspective of what Daniel talked about in terms of medical care. And we used to get our medical care at a doctor's office or an emergency room or a hospital. And I think today, and we'll have one of the later speakers, Lucy, will talk about medical care is going to be provided wherever you are. And so I'm going to take what does it take to start and thrive it? Well, I'm a digital health doctor, okay? And I've been working in digital health since it wasn't even a term. And so my company, AliveCore, makes personal cardiovascular monitors, personal ECG devices. And one of the things that we believe in and believe very strongly is that you have to have clinical validation, that you should publish first and do your PR later. And so from our first presentation back in April of 2012 to one of our latest, we have now hundreds of peer-reviewed publications that validate the various clinical scenarios where our technology is used. And so because of that, you will see our technology in basically almost every cardiovascular and digital health journal. And so we've got publications literally all over the world, and that has led us to the second thing that enables. Not only adoption by customers, but acceptance by the regulatory bodies. In this case, the Food and Drug Administration and the regulatory bodies around the world. We're in 46 countries. And so these are all of our 510Ks. I think I may be short a couple. I did this slide several weeks ago. But yeah, we have 2 pages worth of 510Ks. And that's because we have clinical validation that shows what the FDA regulates: safety and efficacy. And so if you're going to build a digital health company that is beyond the wellness space into healthcare, taking care of patients, that's what you need to prove, that your solution is safe and that it does what you say. When you make a claim, you can prove that claim, and that you can prove it to patients and prove it to their providers. And so because we've done that, we have providers all over the world who adopt us. And these are some of our many users. Full disclosure, the Mayo Clinic is actually an investor in our company. And so, but we have users literally all over the world. I could name places like Edinburgh or Qatar, or Vietnam or Taiwan. But again, that's based on the clinical validation. Many of these places have actually done research with our devices to prove that efficacy. And so that leads us to where do we go? Well, where we go is we have 6 million lifetime users. We have about 1 million active customers. We have a third of a million actually subscribers in 47 countries. We have recorded into our cloud with our devices over 350 million ECG rhythm strips. We have over 175 published or issued US patents, and like I said, 250 plus peer-reviewed publications. And this is the foundation. So intellectual property, clinical validation, uh, support by the healthcare organization. We have many physicians, principally cardiologists, who, when they suspect something is going on with their patient, but they haven't been able to elucidate it, they recommend that they buy one of our devices. So, have we prospered? Well, today, while we may have pioneered the personal ECG, you have many of the largest companies in the world, Apple, Google, Samsung, as well as a number of smaller and more nimble companies like Whoop and Garmin and Withings, who provide the same type of data, personal ECG, yet we're still the experts. We have more technologies, more insights than any of them, more FDA clearances that allow us to apply more AI. And again, starts on that foundation of clinical validation. And that has garnered us some really great and loyal customers. You may have seen this guy before. I think he's on a show called Shark Tank. And on the back of his phone, as he takes a picture of one of the presenters' pictures there, he has an AliveCore Cardia. Again, protect your intellectual property, prove your value. These are the foundations that allow a digital health company to grow and thrive. And so, with that, I'll say thank you and turn it back to our moderator, Risa. It's back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dave. Amazing. Look at what you started. That's incredible. And I know you also have so many stories of how your technology has resulted in early detection, truly life-saving. So looking forward to you sharing some of those stories in the panel. All right. The moment we're all been waiting for, our panel discussion. I'd like to invite Dr. Daniel Kraft, Dr. Dave Albert, Jim Joyce, and Dr. Lucian Ide back on the stage. Lucian Ide is absolutely incredible. She's gone from concept to marketplace to exit, physician scientist. So excited to hear you share your journey. And Jim Joyce, serial entrepreneur. And yeah, just incredible what you've done. And now helping companies to protect their intellectual property. So excited to hear your journey as well. So I will be back toward the end. We hope that those who have joined us will put questions and comments in the chat. You can address them through the panel, or we can wait till the end for Q&A. So enjoy. Dr. Kraft, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Risa. So our conversation today is about what it takes to build a digital health company that can really move from idea to adoption, from innovation to implementation, and ultimately really provide measurable impact, as Dr. Dave has been showing with AliveCore. So we want to explore how our founders think about evidence, IP, how you differentiate, clinical trust, all the lessons they've been learning and building. So I'm going to ask each of our amazing panelists to introduce themselves, their company, the problem they set out to solve, and maybe a milestone or two, an inflection point in their journeys that have taken them from idea to launch to impact. And I think we'll start with Dr. Lucy to give us a share of what she's done on her amazing entrepreneurial pathway. Over to you, Lucy.
All right, thank you. So great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Lucy Ide. I was the founder and CEO of a company called Remedy which I started 15 years ago and ran that until we sold to Health Recovery Solutions 2 months ago. Physician scientist by background, left clinical medicine, sort of when EMRs came into be, because I was really frustrated by this technology that I felt like had so much promise, but so many gaps, especially sort of anticipating workflow and what doctors were really, trying to do with the digitization of health records. So I started a company in the chronic disease management space with a really simple premise that I set out to do, which was how are we supposed to manage a chronic health condition with 1 to 2 data points a year, right? You see a patient in clinic with hypertension or diabetes, maybe they come back 6 months later. And that's a really hard task. And so, back in 2012, my idea was, what if we could monitor that patient when they leave the clinic and connect to data from them in the home and make it easier for clinicians to make data-driven and evidence-based decisions in a more proactive way about patient care. So that is what we did over the course of Remedy's life cycle. And I've sort of pulled up here the whole patient life cycle that we now work in as part of HRS. So from a patient being diagnosed with a chronic condition to maybe that patient having an acute episode of care, hospitalization, or such, where we can help get them out of the hospital sooner, divert them from the hospital and, monitor and manage them at home, to supporting them through a post-acute episode of care, and then back into the community, into the ambulatory setting, and providing the sort of technology and enabling the people who are monitoring and managing and supporting that patient to achieve a better outcome. So that's the journey we've been on. It's been a whole lot of fun. And really key to that, though, in working in the provider space, especially, is building trust, right? Being a good listener to what are really the pain points that our users were facing. Sort of inflection point for me was our first product was in diabetes. And when our users said, hey, that thing you do for me in diabetes, could you do that in like heart failure? Could you do that thing in hypertension? They couldn't really tell me what that thing was, but they wanted us to do more of it, which was really encouraging. So I'll leave the introduction at that.
Great. And just on that point, if you were to go back in time or to give one kernel of advice to someone starting a company that enables it to scale and exit like you did, aside from listening to your customers or your patients and the need knowers, any other scintillations of what you do differently or make sure people do now?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think to build on the introduction of the evidence really does matter, right? Sort of impact trumps everything else. And so being really deliberate of taking the time to gather that data, to gather those stories, it's easy to always focus on the next problem to solve and to both for your own and your team's own mental health, like celebrate the wins, celebrate the impact that you're having. That's what keeps you going when things don't go well, and they won't always go well. But also capture that so that you can tell that story, whether you're telling that to an investor, an ex-customer, a partner, an acquirer. You need to be able to articulate that impact.
Fantastic. Thanks. And now, all the way from Ireland, Jim Joyce, founder of Clear IP, but also has a storied past as a successful investor, entrepreneur, and founder. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Daniel, Lucy, and Dave. Great to be with you on the panel. I will share my slides as instructed here. Um, so, for those that don't know me, my name is Jim Joyce. I'm the CEO of a company called Clear IP. My background I like to describe as a recovering pharmaceutical executive. So I spent lots and lots of years inside big pharma. Went on to leave and build my first healthcare company in IV administration, injectable kind of clinical service across Ireland and the UK. Exited out of that company, and on the back of that one, on the back of that exit, I invented a piece of technology for tracking injectable medications, and went on to take that from an idea in my head to scaling and taking it public. So that's my background, and now I've kind of moved into the space of trying to help health technology, entrepreneurs, beyond health technology, but with a real passion for health technology. For for Clear IP, the company that I founded about 2 years ago, is focused on a problem I think both our panelists have brought up here today, is when you're in the process of setting the right foundations for a company, really, if you listen to the importance of making that clinical case through established peer-reviewed articles, for seeking the right levels of patent protection or IP strategy. For me, that always comes down to, my view, which is you want to seek clarity in everything you do at those early stages. When there's so many options available to you, you want to chase clarity in everything. So clarity in your clinical evidence, clarity in your IP strategy. And so I've kind of forked off and built a company that seeks to kind of give those early stage entrepreneurs clarity in their IP, hence Clear IP. And we really felt that there was an opening in the marketplace, that a lot of the tools that have been built have really been built for large companies, large law firms, large governments, institutions, tech transfers, universities, but not always for the people with the actual ideas. And so this whole, fantastic set of tools have become available. So we've built out a system for innovators. We know that innovators today, less than 5% of them will file actual IP for their companies within the 2 years of filing it. We know if they do file the IP, they'll increase the value, they'll increase the chance of a venture capital raise by 10x, chance of a successful exit by 3x. And so we've built out an end-to-end system that's put tools in the hands of innovators, that allows them to kind of capture ideas, gain very quick feedback on that, disclose, improve it, search it, map for novelty, and file that. And we're able to, by kind of reversing the process and putting the tools in the hands of these entrepreneurs, we've kind of flipped the process on the head, and we're able to pass that cost savings back to the entrepreneur, give them clarity over their budget, and hopefully give them access to kind of Clear IP. I think that's kind of it. I mean, just a quick, when I was looking, Daniel, at what's happening in the IP space, is we're kind of facing a real boom in filings right now. And we're attributing that to a number of things, but a lot of it's obviously driven by what's happening in AI, that it's opened up the imagination, the capacity, and the tools to kind of founders. So it's something to really consider. And then specifically, when we look at healthcare today, we see this explosion in many of these specific use cases right now, where tools that might not have considered in the past, if we kind of dig into that, we can see that healthcare is really driving a lot of that boom and kind of new filings. So in a nutshell, that's me, Daniel, and that's a little bit about Clear IP. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And because IP is becoming so important, whether you're starting a company or growing one, maybe just give us a quick background, a 101 for listeners who haven't never filed a patent. It's a bit Byzantine, it's a bit, sounds intimidating. There's provisional patents, there's formal
Right.
ones, there's global. Just maybe 1 minute on what folks need to know and what you guys can enable.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lots of people don't know. Even people that have filed lots. I don't have Dave. I don't have your numbers. I have 40 patents that I filed over the years. But I think it always starts with the quick thing you want to do is get a very quick assessment of your strategy. So when people think about IP, we can think about trade secrets, we can think about trademarks, copyrights, design patents, utility patents that protect against a certain utility. So there's a broad church, but it's quite intuitive when you actually look into what they're trying to do. When a lot of people, when they think about patents, what you're doing is you're disclosing your idea to the government in return for a chance at exclusivity over a set of claims. So you're in that kind of, that's that process. So if you think, I guess maybe to answer the question maybe more precisely, is if you think you're on the forefront of something highly inventive, you're exploring new areas, and you're taking an investor capital and you're building on a company, in my opinion, you want to start to explore, specifically through tools like ours or attorneys, start to explore where are those kind of invention zones, and then start to explore, different types of tools to you. And the two obvious tools, Daniel, it would be you either file a provisional patent, which kind of gives you option to file in the future, reduce your costs, but maybe show your commitment to the process, or you could file something called a utility patent, which is a direct application into a government or multiple governments there. But you'll file that in where you are putting out your application, then you wait time, and you probably need about a couple years. You need about 2 years at least before you're going to get a possible grant, and it's about a year to get kind of feedback on it. And that covers it.
Perfect. Thanks. It's a broad space. And maybe just to riff to Dr. Dave, who's been so inventive, just for those who are thinking of inventing, what have you learned over time? Any kind of centralizations of things to do, whether it's putting on a napkin and filing a provisional, just lessons you've learned, and then back to AliveCore and your success there. What strategies have you leveraged that you think would be relevant to other digital health companies at any stage?
Well, first of all, you need to think about IP early. So go to Clear IP, think about it early. And the reason I say that is that some people don't understand that if you file a provisional patent, okay, or you publish a paper, you have a timer, okay, that's going off. And while you may be able to file a US patent, you will not be able to file international patents. You're giving up rights. You need people who understand about the timers that go off. And so, there's the old notion of file early and often. And that's certainly when I was a student, I got my first patent when I was still in medical school and graduate school, and that was an education. And that led to a series of patents and filings. And one thing I will tell you is a patent is not an automatic excluder. You have the right to sue someone with a patent. It doesn't just keep somebody out from whatever business you're in. So it's the right to protect. It is not automatic protection. And so that's something else to understand because that process of taking your patent and using it aggressively to protect your business is not for the faint of heart nor the thin of wallet. And so I would tell people you really need to understand all of those aspects of intellectual property. However, they are assets. And when you look to raise money or to sell your business to exit in any way, those assets are given real value. So again, IP early and often, go see Jim Joyce and Clear IP.
Great. Lucy, any thoughts on that element from any intellectual property perspective, as well as the RPM, the remote patient monitoring space, which you've been in, has evolved dramatically. Any sort of thoughts on how to enter that space, given it's so thick with intellectual property, but also so ripe for potential?
Um, yeah, so I think we've been on both sides of this, right? We've had folks come in and send letters to us that they hold very broad patents on the concept of remote patient monitoring, and we need to cease and desist all activities. So that's the other side of this, is sort of patent trolls in that world. And I think having good lawyers who can look at something like that, help you not be overly reactive, because often what they're doing is looking for you to write them a quick check or, and in that case, they were going after us and a lot of much bigger companies than us. So we just sort of sat back and let the bigger companies fight the fight that it was a really bogus claim and it all went away. I think on, our own intellectual property, we've done a fair amount of work with medical device companies and pharma, and sometimes those are collaborative agreements and really great opportunities. You need to be really careful in that contracting that you're not blurring lines of ownership of IP, right? So with our software platform, and we were always very clear that like that's where the IP ownership ended, right? And anything we did collaboratively sort of ended at the API for us, if you will, and the partner, so that there was never any quote joint IP that can become a real problem when you go into diligence for an acquisition or for raising money. So I would just caution folks when you're excited and you're given a big opportunity with a industry partner and you want to sign the contract and book the couple of $1 million, be sure that you're having good counsel review those contracts and especially the IP implications.
Great. Jim, any closing thoughts on the IP side? And then want to riff to sort of other elements of startup world.
No, I think they covered it really well. I think that clarity kind of hangs through for me. I always think like my first thing is, it's know where you're at, know what IP you have, and then probably to Dave and Lucy's point, be really ambitious about where you can go. And that's that kind of, and then people can react to that. They can understand it, they can understand your intention. It's the same thing for clinical trials. Know what clinical claims you have today and be ambitious about where you're going. So that's how we'd hang it together.
Right, and just for those who are inventing, I've done several patents. This you start with a notebook, writing it down, typing it down, so you at least have a disclosure you can track. And it
Right,
may be perfect. It can again start at the back of the napkin, especially with the provisional. You can throw the kitchen sink at it and narrow it down later. And what's
right.
exciting now is sometimes AI can be your partner in thought elementing this, but
Yeah.
also now we have all these convergent tools to invent with.
Right. And I love Dave, like when you did your patent in college, like I think this always starts with like an idea, like all your companies that you built is an idea. It's like a manifestation of idea. And ideas can be quite emotional, even though they feel clinical or they feel, very specific. And so you have them, you forget them, you forget the prudence of it, the providence of it. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to solve because I know that I'm that way, that when the ideas come to you, to your point, Daniel, get them down. That's what, we develop tools along those kinds, largely to kind of solve my own problem of not losing the idea later.
Well, it used to be, I have a shelf of notebooks
Right,
that date back to 1979. Okay.
right,
And
right,
today I don't use notebooks because in 2012, the U.S. America Invents Act was passed, and the United States became homogeneous with the rest of the world. It's not the first to invent, it's the first to file. And so
right.
filing of the IP superseded a dated notebook entry, which
Yeah,
previously had been used
clinical
in the United
bedside.
States
Yeah, yeah,
to declare prior art and priority. And so the world changed. It's now homogeneous. And that means, just having a notarized notebook is not good enough. You need to have a patent filed. And so
yeah.
it changed how I've done it. And I think everybody needs to be aware, again, go to Clear IP. Get people who can help you. And by the
Love
way,
it.
I'm not getting paid at all by Jim Joyce. Okay. I have no commercial interest in Clear IP, but I believe in IP.
Yeah,
And so
appreciate it.
because of that, I think b building a business to help innovators and entrepreneurs is, excuse me, it's God's work. Thank you, Jim.
So IP clearly important, but all of you now have great experience in building successful startups and scaling them and exiting them or getting close to that realm. Let's zoom back to when you're starting a company. What are some of the fundamentals that you think really separate the ones that are truly promising and are going to scale from those who don't? And what advice would you have for starting entrepreneurs who sometimes come from outside of healthcare as well?
Well, I mentioned it in my talk. If you were going to make a healthcare claim that we're going to improve outcomes in congestive heart failure or in hypertension, for hypertension is one of those things, if I treat it for the next 20 years, 15 years after that, we might see the benefit. But heart failure, I see the benefit right away. You have to prove that. You're going to have to prove it to the payers. You're going to have to prove it to the providers. And, Lucy knows this. So if you're making a healthcare claim, make sure you have the data, and that gets to Jim Joyce talking about clinical trials that supports that claim.
Mm.
There's
Yeah, I
claims
mean,
and there's also you might have the best solution in the world, the best next generation device, but workflow and integration and clinical change in mindset. I don't know, Lucy, what have you seen the RPM world doing healthcare differently with data from outside of the four walls has certainly been a shift. It's still emerging. What have you seen in terms of what makes that successful or can be a barrier?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned clinical workflow, right? And I think that's something that we come back to over and over again. And I often say to folks, the doctors and nurses and pharmacists who we're working with, like they all have lives outside of their jobs, right? They would like to have dinner with their family. They'd like to make their child's soccer game. And one of the bad things that EHRs did in the early years is everybody was staying after their last patient to do all this documentation because it was so inefficient as a new technology that was being implemented. And so that's kind of what workflow is all about to me, right? Of like, we can't it can't be better but take longer, right? It has to be better and be as efficient, if not more efficient, meaning saving time. And so that means it has to be part of that EHR workflow, right? That's where everybody lives and breathes and spends all their time, for better or for worse. You're smiling, right? Like, but it is the foundation basically of healthcare delivery today from a data point of view. And so just making sure that anything new, novel, we're bringing in data from the home about patients. We have outside clinical teams who might be supporting the monitoring of those patients, but there needs to be visibility for that patient's care team, their primary care doc, the specialists, the nurses, the population health, who aren't even involved in the program. But we need to make sure that there's continuity and visibility. And the way to do that is to make sure that data ends up in the right place in the EHR as automatically as possible so that nobody's doing dual data entry or uploading files or any of that business. There's just no tolerance for it.
And increasingly, it's not just the data, it's the insights that are summarized because no one wants to look at
Correct.
every EKG or blood pressure or sleep number. And then Jim, big pharma, which you've been involved with, is now more integrating in with AI and digital and solutions that bridge digital therapeutics and APIs. Any insights from your prior work as well that catalyzes successful companies to blend that convergence?
Yeah, I think that, despite everything we talk about, the fantastic companies that we have, here represented, is that if you still go into the average home of, a patient living in Florida, I'm thinking of my 86 and, 85-year-old parents, the remote patient monitoring space is still wide open for opportunity to impact their lives, and then it might be the solutions are just not getting to them or they have trouble doing it. And so, and then pharmaceutical companies, which my last company, Health Beacon, we built it into specialty pharmacy. We use pharmaceutical companies to kind of probably initially steer our solution and helping injectables get tracked, kind of in the home setting. But I think you start with some embedded advantages when you conceive of a company and you conceive of your pursuit, and your advantages are that you can sustain, if you're inspired by your own vision over there, or maybe a co-founder's vision or whatever that is, you can stay on that pursuit longer than the bigger companies can. And then internally, as they bring solutions to the marketplace, the burden of proof inside a massive pharmaceutical company to launch a new service is huge. But the burden of proof for you and initial seed funding that you have is much lower as long as you get your investors or whatever resources to back you on that. So you have an embedded time advantage, and you have an embedded, I would say, almost consistency. People think of entrepreneurs as jumping from thing to thing, but the great ones stay on something like as long as Lucy and David have said, Dr. Dave has stayed on it. You stay on that pursuit for years and years and years, and you almost can't compete with that, right? You don't get 145 findings or 100, whatever, how many 100, 400 clinical evidence if not stayed on that pursuit. So I think leaning into your embedded advantages, working with those, and then you may help that pharma company as a client because they can't stay on it, right? The average tenure of an executive inside a pharma company will be 2 years, 3 years in their position. They might be with the company for 20, but they'll be in that position for 2 or 3 years. So they have a window of time, whereas the entrepreneur, again, entrepreneurial companies kind of start to break. You figure out you have something after year 7, right? I don't know if you agree. You know.
But you're right, and I think there's built-in advantages for a startup in terms of focus and it getting to scale. That is a $100 million business, not very exciting to Eli Lilly right now.
Right.
They're $950 billion market by far. By the way, they used to be a decent company. Now they're twice as big as J&J in market cap.
Mm,
And
mm.
and anybody here know why? Yeah, GLP-1. That's
GLP-1s,
it.
yeah. Yeah.
Bingo, done. They will generate $50 billion of free cash flow this year from Zepbound. 50
Right.
billion. But Lucy's right. Lucy, you're absolutely right. You can have the greatest innovation, but if it doesn't fit into the current workflow for physicians, if it's a physician-facing, healthcare-facing innovation, it will go nowhere because they cannot afford to change their workflow, their practices. I have a wife who's a faculty member, a medical faculty member at USC, and she does 12-hour days and then comes home and closes charts. She's supposed to be off. And she's a
Mm,
grandma, by the way. So Dr. Grandma is closing charts at 10 o'clock at night.
mm.
That's no bueno. So and if you're going to try to tell her you got to do something different or add anything, you got to be kidding. Ain't going to happen. So you need your innovations to be proven, to be protected, but also to fit into that workflow. If and by the way, for consumers, not every consumer's a patient, but every patient's a consumer. If you're going into their lives, you need to fit into their lives.
Mhm.
Whether it's a ring that seems ubiquitous and also, you don't have to do anything. I don't have to
Mm.
do anything for this thing to monitor me. And non-compliant issues or issues without compliance are huge. So these are all critical points. I hope the audience has got that notebook out and writing them down.
So lots of challenges. So we're going to go 5 more minutes and then open it up to our amazing audience's questions. So put them in the chat and Risa will synthesize those. But what are some of the biggest challenges you've each experienced? And what strategic decisions did you make that really created more value when you address those challenges? And then I'll ask you to put on your futurist hat. And given all the ways that AI and digital and RPM and agentic health are coming together, what would be your view for the next 5 or so years? And what sort of unmet needs might companies want to or need to have opportunities to address as they build to address those? I'll start with Lucy.
Um, from a challenges point of view, I think sort of to build on a comment already made about like staying the course and being, sort of committed to the problem if you really think you've identified a problem to solve. So the pandemic brought sort of, I talk about everyone, jumping into the deep end of virtual care, right? When we entered the pandemic, people have been dabbling around the edges with telemedicine and this and that. And all of a sudden, we all did it. Everyone had some sort of virtual visit. That was great, but it created a ton of noise in the market. And it was a little bit of a moment for us of like, just take a deep breath and keep doing what we know how to do well, right? And don't be totally freaked out or flustered by the fact that everybody in their garage who knew nothing about healthcare was starting a remote patient monitoring company in the year 2021 and 2022. Um, and and just trying to not get too distracted by bright, shiny things that will come and go in the market, unsolicited advice, most of which, may not be good, and just being committed, right? That doesn't mean don't pivot, don't be responsive to the market, all those things. But that was an interesting challenge to kind of come through the highs and lows of funding and innovation that happened during that period and try to settle back into like, this is an enterprise healthcare purchasing decision that takes time and patience, and we need to see that through. So I think in the unmet needs part of it, when you mentioned, it's not just the data, it's the insights that are being surfaced in the EHR. And we've talked about sort of clinical workflow and hinted at this clinician burnout, right, of closing charts at 10 p.m. I think that's a huge unmet need. I'm hoping that this generation of medical trainees, we've hit bottom and we're coming back up from sort of, what's been a really tough time in the practice of medicine. And a lot of people have fallen out of love with their career in medicine over the past, 5 to 10 years. And so I think that need there and building on your, future looking is how do you bring joy back to the practice of medicine and really leverage technology to do the things that we don't need humans to do and be intentional in thinking about it that way. We don't need technology to do everything. There are certain things that we as humans do really uniquely well. So I hope people inventing for the future will come at it that way of like continue to give love and respect to the humans and, and have the technology hopefully bring some additional joy to the humans who are in the practice of medicine.
Right. Human focused care, 100%. Thanks. Jim.
Yeah, I think strategically, the way I think about it now, as a guy who started building companies like mid-30s, I don't want to age myself, but I'm older than that now. And is that, I entered into it with a sense of like optimism about everything, right? It's kind of, I was dropped on my head as a child, so I was always optimistic. And I think on the financing side, I had a bit of a finance background, so I get quite clever about how to finance my, whatever condition I was in terms of trying to accelerate payments from a pharma client or some kind of supply chain. I built out a global device company, and I was, I'd be building product in China and sending it to Ireland and installing stuff and getting off to the US and then sending Pfizer a bill for $30, right? And I look back at those systems strategically that I would be super aggressive. I'm super aggressive today about the clever financing that has just such practical realism in your financing structure, sales cycles, all those things. And a lot of that stuff you can figure out a lot more because there's more like watching Oracle Public today. There's so many more blueprints of companies that have managed to kind of get, I think with digital health, they weren't there before. We have AliveCore, we have Remedis, we have all these companies out there as models. So I'd be strategically, I could be quite clever about kind of getting myself into a corner financing wise and then cleverly getting out of it. I'd kind of reverse that now and get clever at the beginning instead of having to reverse myself out of it. So that way my one, view, I think, just jumping on the future side, I think we're missing the boat about what's going to happen with this agentic reality and transformation that's happening in the sense that I am implementing everything. I have OpenClaw agents and I have, I'm using every tool that's available. I have full-time teams. I'm exploring everything. And I am only getting busier and busier and busier and busier. Coordination, inventing new opportunities. So I think we're naive to think that there isn't a ton of work for us humans to do, over the next period of time. If we in fact have to rewrite all of the software, all of these systems that have been built, there's so much, we need people coming out of medical school to think those processes, to embrace those tools and really reimagine them in a different way. And then once we do that, I can't imagine that human imagination won't continue what's next after that. So I'd have a much more optimistic view instead of like it's going to replace you, it's going to this, it's going to now, it's scary as you have to, transfer your companies from, kind of a pre-agentic world to a future agentic world. But I'm incredibly optimistic about where the opportunity is for us. And there's going to be tons of work. We need lots of smart people trying to solve this healthcare issues that exist.
And just double click, I think we don't just need new technologies, but a new operating system, as you sort of mentioned. It maybe it starts in Ireland or Singapore or the global south before it reaches the broken healthcare systems of the US to not just digitize or AIify the fax machine and prior auths and but to really reimagine the whole operating system because that's where the shift can happen. Dave, you've been building this out. Number one, I'm so amazed. We met in 2011. You came to my first Future Men in 2012, I think. I now see ads for AliveCore on CNN. It's amazing. You've been building the future. What are your challenges, points today, and then what do you
Well,
see in the next
I
5 years?
think going on top of something Lucy said, we all went through the pandemic. So 2020 to 2022 was a very strange time. And what I would urge entrepreneurs to think about is those are unusual. Those are black swans. There were people who were able to capitalize. Telemedicine became overnight a big business. And so you had a company like Teladoc, and then you had another company called Livongo. And a $20 billion company bought a company for $18 billion. And today that combined company is worth $1 billion. Okay. What happened? Well, that craziness of 2020 to 2022 went away. So you need to, in an engineering term, low pass filter all of these bumps that happen in the world and see the real trend. And so, we all, those of us who, started before and saw that amazing step function that happened in 2020 when people wouldn't go to the doctor, wouldn't go to the emergency room. And I saw it from several perspectives. One, my wife, but more importantly, my oldest son was the lead COVID doctor at Cedars-Sinai. He was a brand new faculty member in internal medicine, and he just got crushed for 18 months. And I saw it firsthand, but then that's gone. That was there and it's gone. And I think you need to really understand that those kinds of things are not just temporary, but are distortions in what I call the long-term trend. Now we have AI. AI is a long-term trend, but we're just in the, October 2023, ChatGPT changed the world. Just like in 2007, Steve Jobs said one more thing, introduced the iPhone, changed the world. Be cognizant of those changes, but understand what's the long-term trend and plan appropriately.
Amen. Over to you, Risa.
All right. Thank you all for that illuminating discussion. We do have a question in the chat. Eleanor Burgess is asking, she's just beginning to consult with UX workflows, sales for health startups, and she was just wondering if you had advice for startup founders in terms of looking for your favorite contractors.
You want it, Dave?
It's like
In terms of looking for your favorite contractors in building that UX, that flow, I think when you think about contractors, in my opinion, it's a like hiring staff or employees. An organization has a culture and a dynamic that you got to try to match with. And so my advice generally when I'm doing that is I try to get a little bit of a bake off and not get too emotionally attached to the initial kind of developers and UX people I'm working with. Give them a piece of work, get product back, understand it, see if you have a fit with it, see what their cadence and professionalism is, and then kind of lean into the one that you are kind of falling in love with.
I,
very good.
I just got back from MedTech World in Palm Beach, which is they have them in Dubai and had one here, and that's one of many medical focused uh, meetings, and there were so many contractors who are willing and interested in helping you build your business, whether it's regulatory, product development,
Mm.
uh, hiring, etc. So I don't think there's any shortage. And I think what Jim said is true. You need to do very careful due diligence, just like investors do on you, when you are evaluating and then later hiring these uh, helpers.
Very nice. So, Laura Kusumoto. Hi, Laura. Glad you're here. Laura's asking, what are some good strategies for finding potential users to talk to within the healthcare system to help with understanding impact on workflow, backend integration, etc.?
Well, this is a great question, and it's one that fits. Many health systems today have their own accelerators. Cedars-Sinai does. There are healthcare. We Rock Health was an early one, but now there are many digital health accelerators all over the world, and so many health systems have accelerators of their own, and that gives you an intro into their clinical systems and an intro into their clinicians. And so I would say find one of those. They all have applications, Health Wildcatters in Dallas, Rock Health in San Francisco, all over. Find one and get yourself engaged with them because they will help you answer some of these questions and certainly get feedback from a specific healthcare organization.
Very nice. And Carrie Marshall, hello, glad you're here. And she's looking forward to more veterinary examples. Get in touch with me. We're doing a lot in the veterinary space as well. Actually, Dr. Dave has an origin story in the veterinary world. Would you like to share that? Because
Well,
Carrie's
the simple one was, other than Dr. Kraft, who was in our first research cohort from Dr. Leslie Saxon's body computing, we didn't have an FDA clearance in the beginning, but we had product. And so what we did is we sold it to veterinarians, and we were able to generate a non-insignificant revenue in our first year before we had our first 510(k) by selling to veterinarians because they're not regulated. That is, veterinary medicine is not regulated. And to this date, we have veterinarians literally all over the world who use our products to monitor and evaluate their patients. And so that was that. And by the way, that's a strategy I've told other people to do. If you happen to have a medical device that potentially has value on animals, because we spend, by the way, it's out of pocket, right? Dogs, cats, the amount of money we spend on them, it's in the
Right.
many tens of billions of dollars a year. It's a huge market. And so see if your solution has a place there because you don't have the FDA to worry about.
Yeah, we have a whole dedicated veterinary page on Digital.Health.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
definitely check that out. There's some more here. So Gabriel Nisanov says, as a young founder and entrepreneur, how can we connect with mentors and superstars such as yourselves to help us learn and build? Well, certainly, Daniel, they can come to your next Med Health conference. The next one will be spring of 2027. I think there's always local gatherings of health tech groups as well.
Yeah. I think that it's a good question. Like I think that, everyone, everyone wants to kind of connect with young founders and young entrepreneurs and people trying to do that. So we all want to do that, even if you're very busy. I think everyone, probably people that are on a podcast like this or doing projects like Digital.Health want that. So the want is there, the time is constrained. And so you have to kind of probably approach, working with them and think about, how can you be generous in terms of be sensitive and generous with the amount of time that you can take. So if you get a chance to talk with them, sharing your idea, make it easy to interact with you, and start to build a true relationship off of the back of that. So it's that classic, how do you find
Well, it's really difficult to be a shy founder.
yeah,
Reach out, be aggressive,
right.
reach out to Jim Joyce because I have no time, but he does.
You can send me a LinkedIn note, Gabriel. I'm happy to share. Do.
Talk to Lisa.
All right. And perhaps our final question here from Christian Haberman. Thank you very much. Did you find that solely focusing on solving one healthcare issue led to faster progress and success, or did you have to pivot greatly from your initial hypothesis?
Dave.
Well, did I pivot? To be honest with you, we haven't really pivoted. So,
Yeah.
our products are used by patients at home and anywhere they are. They're also used by doctors on patients. Eric Topol, who Dan mentioned, he goes into every patient visit and clinic with an AliveCore device. So we didn't change, but the world changed. And
Mhm.
smartphones became the front door of healthcare. AI is now the first provider. The world changed, and so you need to be aware of those so-called macro changes. I don't know if anybody remembers the book Megatrends. Well, we've got some real serious megatrends in the world right now, AI being first and foremost, and you better be cognizant of how that will impact your ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I start on something, I stay on it for like 10, 15 years. So I kind of look at it as you pivot so much of the distribution, the approach to market, how do you communicate it? There's so much pivoting that's happening that the thesis though of what you're trying to do, I think until that really stirs you and you're really grounded in, I think you got to do some more work in my opinion, but you want a thesis like yours, Dr. Dave, that you can pursue for years and years and years. And it might be through an iPhone versus what you originally imagined, but the thesis of how you can make, cardiovascular care accessible in a remote manner, you know,
Treat it
stays the
like
same.
your children. I hate to tell everybody, but when they turn 18, they don't go away. Okay. And your responsibility and your engagement doesn't end. So treat it
Sure.
like children.
Yeah.
You're going to be there a long time. You're going to be committed, and you're going to do your best. And so that I
Right.
would treat your startup like your kids.
100%.
Before we go, what's the name of the tennis shoe company that pivoted to an AI company?
Oh,
Free,
yeah.
Freebird?
Bird.
Freebird? Wait,
Yeah, the bird shoe or something, wasn't it bird? Yeah. Yeah, it's
that
something
was
like
a
that.
sharp pivot.
I've got bird shoes. Now I'm walking on AI Air. I don't know what that is. But now, of course, AI can design your shoes and everything else. And just back to the element of consultants,
Oh, Allbird.
Albert,
All bird.
consultants, we all use them in different forms, but now with AI, it's a challenge. If you're a UI consultant or a graphic designer, you can go to Claude Design
Or a
or
software developer.
yeah, all these things are
Mm,
moving fast. And so back to the last thing I think we should wrap on is if you're building a startup today in 2026, which used to be the future for 2030, you have to look at where these mega trends are going. The exponentials will be at
mm,
ChatGPT 10, will be at the $10 genome, will be at the smart ring that can do blood pressure, blood sugar, and an EKG. So, as you solve for big challenges, don't forget to look to where the puck is going, because it won't be static and it's only moving faster. So I think
Okay.
with that, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's close this out.
We'll close it out. Someone is asking about, how would you trust an early career hire who didn't have the experience, not necessarily the right titles to navigate and implement RPM or EHR integrations in a growing company?
Well, you better trust your spouse. So
Okay, yeah. Well, I would say definitely apply. Don't let the job description, or what it says the criteria are deter you, because it's who you are and what you bring, your talent to the job.
And
So
capacity to learn.
the capacity to learn. Thank you. So as I was listening and reflecting, I think I would sum it up as Dr. Dave said, really begin with that clinical validation. As Jim pointed out, protect your intellectual property. And as Lucy was sharing, do be observant of those wins, lean into them, tell your story. And I love how you said this technology should help us to bring the joy back into practicing medicine. So again, thank you to each of you for sharing your incredible journeys as you have built technology to improve access to quality healthcare, to really create, usher in this new era of health and human flourishing. I'd like to thank all those who joined us today. If you're part of our Digital.Health community, we thank you. If you haven't signed up on Digital.Health yet, we welcome you to sign up for free. That's the URL, Digital.Health, easy to remember. And you can begin exploring 5,000 digital health products and solutions, AI-powered solutions. As Daniel was sharing, we have an incredible set of resources from videos and journals, podcasts, you name it. So lots to learn about. So again, we thank you all for joining us at Digital.Health as we learn, share, care together.